much for joining us tonight to discuss cyanobacteria and our shoreline restoration project. We have refreshments and some snacks. If you'd like to grab something during the presentation, feel free. Further, we have some fact sheets available for you, and we have some well testing kits. If you're interested, they're not specific to cyanobacteria, they're for E. coli and bacteria. Tonight we have our guest speaker, Nathan Wilson from Blue Green Labs, who we work with often. Nathan is a PhD candidate at Lakehead University and has been studying cyanobacteria and has had a passion for it for over 10 years. Nathan will be starting us off with a discussion about cyanobacteria, what it is, its negative effects. I'm going to fill you in on what the LRCA is doing. And then my colleagues over here, Jesse and Ashley, they're on the stewardship team, and they're going to tell you a bit about shoreline plantings, our Seeds for Conservation program, and some upcoming events. In addition to that, if you have to use the washroom, we have the ladies' washroom by the fountain on the right side of the hallway, and men's is just around the corner outside this door. Before we get started, I'm just really curious, who knows what cyanobacteria or blue-green algae is? Just put your hand up. Oh, no. Okay, that's actually pretty good. Now, how many of you have actually seen it? Okay, more than I was expecting. How many of you have reported it? Fantastic. Okay. So tonight we are going to help you understand what cyanobacteria is and how to navigate what to do when you encounter it on your waterfront property or if you're out recreating and you run into it. So we're going to get started. Nathan, I'll hand it off to you.
Thanks so much. Thanks everybody for coming, and thanks for everybody who's online and couldn't make it in person. As Michelle said, yes, I started my journey on cyanobacteria back in 2015. So just on the cusp in the springtime here of the 10-year mark. Not something I expected to do and be involved in for this long. It was just a happenstance kind of thing. So I take the time to share a little bit more with everyone, my experience and the growth of my knowledge on cyanobacteria. So everyone's aware of cyanobacteria, which is great. It seemed to be most of the hands went up there. It's a very old organism. It's photosynthetic bacteria. It causes a lot of problems for people because we don't know technically how to classify it. Is it bacteria? Is it a plant? It's not quite a plant, it doesn't have cell walls, but it's got a chloroplast, so it can photosynthesize. Have everybody heard of the Great Oxygenation Event? One of the first mass extinctions on the planet. Yeah, some students nodding their heads. Yeah, perfect. So it's a very old organism. It's been around for a very long time. It's associated with the oxygen we breathe today, so the free oxygen within the atmosphere and being able to grow into human beings and become the wonderful culture and community that we are. There's over 2,000 different species that have been described. So there's a lot of different cyanobacteria, and they exist in freshwater, marine water. There's terrestrial versions of it. People maybe have seen star jelly on iNaturalist. It's a cyanobacteria that grows in warm environments terrestrially. There are unicellular, there's colonial ones. So there's single cell cyanobacteria. There's ones that grow in colonies. I'm going to show some photos later. There's filamentous, there's planktonic, which means they're free floating in the water column. There's some that are attached to the rocks in the bottom, benthic or periphytic, and then there's epiphytic, so some that grow attached to other plants. So real diverse group. They've been around for a long time, and that's part of the issue that people sometimes run into is this an invasive species? Does it come in on some boat or somebody's boots? And the chances are no, it's been around for a very long time and it's likely been in the water. The problem being that we're starting to see it much more than we used to, and it's starting to become more on our minds if that's cyanobacteria and it's in the water. Yeah, if you want to. Yeah, and some of it can bloom under the ice. So that photo there is actually a shared photo that somebody sent to me from Northwest Territories where they had pink cyanobacteria underneath the ice. So it's one of those things, again, just to preface that it's an understudied thing at this point. There's a lot of different ecosystems that it exists in, and a lot of different times it can bloom. So eutrophication, people aware of the term eutrophication? It's a scientific term that coincides with cyanobacteria. It's kind of the driving scientific notation around where does cyanobacteria become a problem, and it's usually from the idea of cultural eutrophication specifically. So The image on the left there is the natural eutrophication process, which is the slow over centuries. Nutrients from runoff and sediment come into a lake, and they transition a lake from a deep cold water oligotrophic being a newer lake, so post glaciation. There's not a lot of nutrients, not a lot of primary producers, so plants usually associated with lake trout, brook trout, things like that, really clean water stuff. And it naturally will progress to a mesotrophic and then eutrophic system. The higher you go, the more nutrients, the more sediment, the more primary production, and the less lake trout. You get a transition to walleye, and then you get a transition to bass and sunfish and carp and those other less sport fish targeted species. The problem emerges when we start talking about cultural eutrophication and the nice diagram there of agriculture, industry, and urban development. So people, when you start to have more people around in the ecosystem, so in the watershed, we start to change things for our enjoyment. So grass, fertilizers, gardens with fertilizers, big agricultural fields full of fertilizers, and that nutrient runs off during spring freshet or snowfall, rainfall, and transitions into the lakes, and we provide a huge amount of phosphorus into the systems, and we can cause changes that way. And this is where the research from the 1970s and the ELA came in and showed us we needed to start minimizing the amount of nutrients that we're putting into the system. So that's kind of the key target for a lot of the work that we do to try to control the cyanobacteria is focused on nutrients in the eutrophication process. So this is a very complicated diagram. There won't be any tests. There won't be any questions on this one. This is here to show people that it's a very complicated thing. And as we do more research and we start to understand the complexity of an ecosystem, it becomes much more diverse, and there's a lot more moving components to it than what we probably think initially. One of the interesting things, there's no studying of lakes usually in the wintertime. We tend to think that, well, once the ice is on, everything kind of stagnates and just sits there. But there's been more and more people starting to look at what happens under the ice, because again, it's just an area that we haven't done a lot of research, similar to Northern Ontario and the Thunder Bay region. There's assumptions that things should be okay, and it's maybe not as okay as we thought with things like climate change and the amount of people on lakes and the longevity of people being on lakes. So very complicated diagram to show the number of different interactions within an aquatic ecosystem, how they interact with one another and all contribute to a changing ecosystem, which might be contributing to algae blooms. So into the fun stuff. So these are 4 images of cyanobacteria taken under a microscope. The top left is the most associated with the problem of cyanotoxins. So it's a secondary metabolite that cyanobacteria can produce. We know the genes that produce it, but we're not sure why. There's been a lot of research, but we haven't nailed down what causes cyanobacteria to produce toxins. So what turns the gene on, what turns the gene off? Is it a stress response, a predation response? Is it a third variable or fourth variable that we haven't looked at? We're not quite sure. We just know that there are genes within the genome of cyanobacteria that can produce toxins that are harmful to humans. And there's a range of them. It's a really fun brain teaser. So the top one there is microcystis, and it's most associated with microcystin, which is the toxin that we monitor for and the government monitors for within raw and drinking water. There's a wide range of variants, but microcystin LR is known to be the most toxic and most predominant variant. So the government monitors and looks out for that one. The other 3 also are known to produce toxins. The most common one that we come across in Lake Superior and the inland lakes so far, in my experience, is this top right one. It's called Dolichospermum lammermanni. It's characterized by those green clusters in the middle. So it makes it really easy to identify those vegetative cells. And then there's those aconites in the middle, which are seed cells. So they cluster together, and then as the season goes on, they die and they fall to the bottom, and they live there through the fall, winter, and then they can regrow in the springtime. So it's really easy to identify once you start to understand it. Phenazine flaws aqua. Everybody been to Lake of the Woods? they've had some really bad blooms of Afanisine flaus aqua, and it's really unique in the sense that it looks like somebody took a really small microscopic lawnmower and cut some grass. And you'll have these little grains of what look to be green rice or grass trimmings in the water. So when you're looking at the water, it produces these flukes, is what they call them, these clusters of vegetative and actinides and heterocysts that cluster in these fur patterns. And then the other one on the far bottom right, Warrencinia or Warrencinia, depending on your preference of pronunciation, is very close to microcystis, but it's peripheral cells and a little bit more oblong than the microcystis. It's another cyanobacteria that I've seen quite a bit of. I've seen it as far north as just some of the flying communities that I work with, but it's another common one that I see quite often in the samples that I pull out of some of the waters. So these are just some examples of the key ones. The other toxins that they're associated with is there's a neurotoxin called anatoxin A and saxitoxin. Saxitoxin is most associated with shellfish poisoning because the shellfish will filter it out and they'll actually bioaccumulate it, and then people eat it, and it's a problem. And then the anatoxin is a neurotoxin, so it affects obviously the brain and the nervous system. It's been associated with, unfortunately, human and animal deaths. So dogs dying in Nova Scotia. There was a family down in Colorado that unfortunately got lost and drank out of a river with some cyanobacteria in it and unfortunately passed away. The microcystis is a hepatotoxin, so it affects the liver, the kidneys, and other organs internally. It's mostly associated with ingestion, but there are other ways for the toxins to irritate your skin, and there is a dermatological toxin, one of the filamentous Lyngbia. It's a fun little one to see under the microscope. So there's a range of them, and unfortunately, those toxins can be produced by multiple species. So it's not just like one species, one toxin. It can be multiple associated with different genuses. So understanding that and appreciating that is the point of trying to get the awareness out of there so that you guys can make the best choice when you see something to report it and whether or not you would like to go in the water. So just a quick recap of, yes, it can be a skin irritation or illness. Not often that we think about when we're entering in the water, the little bit of water we maybe drank as we were diving in for an upset stomach or something later, headaches, things like that. Usually we associate those with something else, maybe heat stroke and things. So just being aware of our surroundings and what we've done is a good thing. Also the pets, that's one of the big concerns that I know Michelle and I both share. Having dogs, you know, you become very much more keen at looking at the water and what floaty little things might be in there, and trying to keep your dogs away from eating the benthic organisms that wash up on shore and dry out is the cause that Nova Scotia dogs have passed away and other dogs have died from that. But it's not just the fear of the toxins. Blooms, if anybody's seen the real thick ones, can cause a lot of environmental issues. They block out the sun, they use up all the oxygen when they die. They fall to the bottom and cause a loss of oxygen, and so you get potentially fish kills. So for those of you that like catching fish, there's problems for the loss of oxygen they need to breathe. And they also can stink. You know, you don't want to be mucking about and driving around your boat with stinky water. So these are some of the other problems. And yeah, I think you can. So the biggest thing is trying to get people to report it more. If you see something, the spills action line at the MOECP is your number one go-to. You can call it in. The more people are paying attention to it, the more people are reporting it, the more awareness that gets out of there that this is something that might be increasing or being a problem, the more attention it gets and the more potentially we can hopefully start to work with people and do something about it. We've got great examples across the top here of the different culprits that sometimes people misinform or misidentify a cyanobacteria bloom with. Duckweed, watermeal, green algae, and the biggest thing I can recommend is safely, if you are able to, with a stick, you can dip your stick or paddle or fishing rod in there to see, are you picking up something out of the water, or is it just kind of skimming through and avoiding whatever utensil you're using? Cyanobacteria is very small, microscopic, so it's not going to cling to it. If it's a green hair algae, like Plodopera or something like that, you will get it stuck to it. That doesn't hold true if it's a benthic thing and you scrape the bottom of the lake and you pull up a whole bunch of periphyton, then it might be cyanobacteria in there, but less likely to be the surface bloom. And then the other big one is the pollen. We're not likely to see pollen in the water in late August, September, and October. Usually our knowledge of cyanobacteria blooms is we start to see them later in the year, but we have started to see them earlier, as early as June, which does coincide with the pollen. But the biggest other, if you can safely protect yourself with some gloves and get a clean jar, if you let the jar sit, cyanobacteria will accumulate at the top, right at the top of the water. But you'll notice when you pick it up, it's all mixed throughout the column, and then it slowly over the course of an hour or two will settle out to the top. If it settles out to the bottom, it's not likely cyanobacteria. And pollen also will settle out right at the top and not throughout the water column. But if you see something like the bottom photo there, you'll notice that it's not just at the top. It's also throughout the water column compared to the pollen sample where it's just right at the top of the water. So, go to the next one. The last little bit that I'm going to talk to are just some examples of blooms that have happened that I've been able to capture, or Michelle's been able to capture, just to give people an idea of the different variety of blooms, because they're not all the same, and they are sometimes very quick, and that's again one of the big issues of the timing of reporting and getting someone to come out and check it can be problematic because they can appear and disappear within hours. So it's a bit of a tricky thing to capture. I'll go to the next one. So. I did. Sorry. This is one of the June samples. I got that animated. And you can see I did doctor this photo a little bit to highlight the mixing. There's obviously some yellow pollen in there, but there's also some cyanobacteria, and you can kind of see how the pollen's sitting on top of the cyanobacteria, which is distributed throughout the water column below it. Again, the other big thing is on your calm, cool mornings when you're waking up and having your coffee, you might see that they're accumulating on the shoreline in the left photo. It's just the accumulation of the cyanobacteria along the shoreline. As the day progresses and the wind starts to pick up, you might start to see something like in the middle where you get a bit of the wind-blown activity, so the organisms being blown by the currents. And then the last one, when you're driving around in your boat and you look over the side and it's like, why do I have a little bit of a tail as I'm trolling through looking for some walleye here? And there's a chance that that is also cyanobacteria, because this is a cyanobacteria bloom that I've just driven through, and you can see the dispersion that it's caused. And then the really bad ones. This is probably two of the worst blooms that I've seen. Nobody's lake here, fortunately. And yeah, just a great example of the key characteristic being that thick paint looking watercolor. So again, you can get a variety of different shades. It doesn't necessarily have to be that solid green, goes all the way to pink, different hues, but cyanobacteria, blue-green, cyano being blue and green, it's usually in that hue that is the pigment that they're associated with. So this is the map that the LRCA graciously put together of the recent blooms. And the final thing I just would want to mention is over the last 4 years, there's been 36 confirmed cyanobacteria blooms within the Thunder Bay region, according to the Thunder Bay District Health Unit. So this is why we're here talking and trying to spread a bit of the education to the public.
So the LRCA began cyanobacteria monitoring at our conservation areas in 2022 as a protective measure for our visitors who are entering open water and recreating. So, and that's also to gain a greater understanding of cyanobacteria presence within the lakehead watershed and on the north shore of Lake Superior. So cyanobacteria monitoring, sampling, and cyanotoxin testing is conducted weekly as a part of our Bathing Beach program. So that generally occurs from mid-July to mid-August. So the cyanobacteria monitoring program is focused on 4 conservation areas, again, where people are accessing the water. As you can see, one is an inland lake where you saw that was kind of a hot spot for blooms, and then the other 3 are on the shoreline of Lake Superior. Hazelwood Lake is actually one of the locations that has been experiencing cyanobacteria blooms annually since 2022 and before, which is why we kind of started this cyanobacteria monitoring program to better protect our visitors. So you may have seen our signage posted if you attended the conservation area in August or even June, because we will have posted advisories when you're not supposed to enter the water because it could be unsafe. So if you see us, feel free to say hello in the field. We often sample on Mondays and Tuesdays. So our staff wade about waist deep into the water to collect some water quality data using a YSI multi-parameter probe. And this includes information such as temperature, pH, and turbidity. And then if you can see this device up here, we use a 53 micron plankton net to collect a sample. And that's just to filter out plankton, algae, and other diatoms that might be in the water sample. So then the samples are stored into a jar and refrigerated until I can get a hold of Nathan, which I would then drop them off. Nathan throws them onto a slide underneath a microscope to assess the planktonic community. So the idea is to determine what the dominant, secondary, and tertiary genuses are in that water quality sample. So the intent is to not only determine if cyanobacteria is present or not, but if there's a high concentration or a concern that might be indicative of a possible bloom in the near future. So at least one genus of cyanobacteria has been found at all of our sample locations. And the observable trend from these sites is that there's an increase in dominance in cyanobacteria and in the phytoplankton community during late August. So the project and the monitoring that we do at our conservation area sites not only includes the microscope work, but we do monitor using a Eurofins algae toxin testing kit. So they're basically test strips that we take to test in situ if there could be toxins in the water, and then so we can gauge whether or not this is something that we need to report or if we suspect a bloom. And so using these two methods, we're kind of monitoring our own conservation areas for our visitors' health and safety. So our monitoring initiatives in no way seek to replace the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks programming. I always encourage you, if you see an algal bloom, report it to Spills Action, and then they'll work with the Thunder Bay District Health Unit to get any information out to you. Any observations or positive test results will end up on the Thunder Bay District Unit Health website. And so they do the toxicity testing, not us. The test strips are just used as a handy tool to help kind of alert if there is an issue. And if there is an advisory posted, any swimming or beach closures will be posted on the Thunder Bay District Health Unit and our website, especially if they're on our own properties, and they suggest that you stay out of the water for 14 days after the bloom has dissipated. So the bloom had to first dissipate, then you have to wait your 2-week interval. So how do you protect yourself? When in doubt, keep out. If you assume that there could be cyanobacteria toxins, or if you've heard that maybe your neighbor saw one, or if you saw it in the Thunder Bay District Health Unit, but the water looks good now, I would suggest you just remain out. I also suggest that you don't drink the water, because this is not a boil advisory effect. That won't work on cyanotoxins. You can't get rid of them in that manner. The same goes for if you're going to be eating the fish that you caught that afternoon. Toxins are not inactivated by cooking the fish. So again, avoid consumption of water and fish. And we encourage you, if you're going to go for a swim, or if you're going to participate in recreation on the water, it's hard when you get to camp and it's like, oh man, I just want to go. I get it. So if you get in the water and there is a kind of a suspicion, make sure you're rinsing off immediately with fresh water and avoid getting it in your mouth or around your eyes. So there are some things you can do to help yourself and your waterfront property and reduce your impact on our water quality. So you can use phosphate-free detergents, personal care, and household cleaning products. Mostly for me, I've just noticed that there's a lot of gray water coming from saunas and those personal care supplies, because sometimes people have saunas right on the water. Sometimes it's only a few feet or meters back, and it's those personal care and just that gray water going in that seems to sometimes spark those blooms. So if you are going to use your personal care products, I know that like Lovely Body, Lush, and what was it? Purity Woods are some really great brands that I could point you in the direction of. Not to just say, yeah, buy this. I actually know the brand, so feel free to ask me after. You can reduce or avoid the fertilizers on lawns. My dad loves a good lawn. I get it. But if you could get phosphate-free fertilizers, that's much better for the ecosystem. Monitor your septic systems to make sure they're not leaching into nearby water sources. Consider looking into the condition of your septic tanks as well, especially if they're on the older side, over 15 years, you may have an issue. prevent livestock or pet waste from entering water systems that could cause excess nutrient loading. You can implement landscaping strategies. I'm not telling you all to get a fountain. I get it. That's more for the like ponds, smaller aquatic ecosystems. But rain gardens are really helpful. But even better would be to leave a buffer strip of native vegetation on the lake or your river waterfront, which segues us into healthy shorelines.
Yeah, so at the Conservation Authority, we love to talk about what a healthy shoreline looks like, what it means to have a healthy shoreline, and really for all of the reasons that Michelle just mentioned. We want a vegetated buffer next to the water with native plants that have deep rooting structures that are able to not only stabilize your bank and reduce erosion, but also take up some of the nutrients that are coming through runoff, maybe tar salts or detergents or cleaning products, whatever it may be, fertilizers. So on the top here, we have some examples of some healthy shoreline and riparian buffers, and on the bottom is sort of like what not to do. So the difference being on the bottom, you see, mown grass right to the edge of the water, whereas on the top we've got a nice variety of vegetation, even different layers of vegetation. So, not exclusively grass, but there's such as shrubs and trees. All the different layers are really, really important. We always preach using native vegetation. What that means is just using the species that have been around for hundreds of years. They typically have deeper rooting structures. And then there's the added benefit of providing wildlife for habitat for wildlife. So LRCA, we love to lead by example. So I just thought I'd show a few examples of some shoreline restoration projects over the past few years so that you can start to get inspired for what you can do maybe on your own shoreline. So here we're at Mission Island Marsh, and on the left side of the screen, we're looking at some shoreline erosion in 2021. And that was the main reason for the restoration work that went on at Mission Island Marsh, was the erosion. But it's become a great example of what a natural buffer of native vegetation looks like, and what it can look like while still providing access to the water, a view of the lake, and sort of balancing all of those objectives. So in 2021, we did get to work. We regraded the bank to a 3-to-1 slope, so just a gradual slope. We did put in some river rock and then planted using native shrubs, and with the help of over the years, hundreds of volunteers have been down to that site to help us put plants in the ground. And here is sort of the after image with everything grown in and the bank stabilized. And then we've even got some milkweed at the site with the monarch caterpillars that are thriving. So this year we're shifting gears to another conservation area. As Michelle mentioned, we have had some ongoing issues at Hazelwood Lake. There's lots of sort of hypotheses as to why, as Michelle mentioned, but really what we can see right off the bat is that we've got mown lawn right to the edge of the water. So let's lead by example here and fix that up. The first step for us this year is going to be to, in the spring, just create a no-mow zone. So stop mowing. We know at Hazelwood that there's not any invasive species, so we're hoping that it's able to revegetate quite nicely if it's just left alone. And then by the fall, we'll sort of reassess, see how it's doing, and put in about 500 of our own native plants to give it a sort of kickstart and boost that revegetation process. At the same time, we are balancing all the recreational activities at Hazelwood Lake that folks know and love. So we're going to be maintaining access to the lake, of course, just revegetating on either side of that access point and doing a lot of education around it as well. We're really excited to be able to get started on this. That's thanks to funding from TD Friends of the Environment. Also, over the past 4 years, we've had our shoreline protection program, and it's actually what kicked off sort of the modern day stewardship work here at LRCA and my role here. So I'm gonna just highlight this program for you because In 2025, the Shoreline Protection Program is evolving into the Cyanobacteria Shoreline Protection Program. So over the past 4 years, we've engaged 35 landowners and their friends and family in revegetating shoreline or stream bank on their property. So we've restored approximately 7,500 square meters of nearshore and riparian habitat. We just do that using native shrubs and trees and perennials, managing invasive species wherever we find them, and then creating wildlife habitat along the way.
So this year with the Cyanobacteria Shoreline Protection Program, we will be accepting applications to be a part of that program. And there will be 10 sites that we'll be able to actually do this work on. And for those selected sites, we will come and visit the property, take a look at the landscape, take a look at any erosion issues that are happening, of course, take note of cyanobacteria blooms that have been happening, take a look at the surrounding vegetation, and we'll take all that information, and based on the conditions of the site, we'll create a concept map. So we'll choose native perennial shrubs and trees that would work well on the site, and we'll create a design for the property so that that can be evaluated prior to the planting. And here are some examples of folks who have participated in our shoreline protection program over the past 4 years. So we have all sorts of different native perennials, shrubs, trees, happy property owners to watch their shoreline not slip away to erosion, right? Stabilizing those banks. And it's really fun to get the property owners involved in the planting as well. Happy faces.
So for those of you that have a pen and paper in the room or online, we're gonna drop some key dates in the next few slides. So specifically for the Cyanobacteria Shoreline Protection Program, we are now open for applicants. We do have some application forms on the side of the room. It's also accessible online at lakeandca.com. We have this QR code that you're able to scan if you're online, or you can just head to our webpage under stewardship section, click on Shoreline Protection Program, and you'll find the application form there. So as Ashley mentioned, 10 landowners will be selected based on eligibility. So basically whether you've had cyanobacteria issues in the past on your lake, and then based on size, and mainly it'll be first come, first served, depending on how many applicants we get. And those 10 landowners will receive a site visit from Ashley and I. We'll come out and assess your shoreline, talk about what we can do, and then draft up a planting plan that will be your sort of guiding toolkit for the spring and summer. You'll then pick up your plants from the LRCA office and then plant them yourselves along your shoreline. So those key dates are as follows, sort of a 5-step process to apply. Firstly, you're going to want to review the application form, attend an information session. So if you're here tonight, well done, completed step 1. The application forms, we're asking that you submit them by May 1st. So we've got over a month to get those in. And then we just ask that you send them in to stewardship@lakeandca.com or drop them off here at the office. In May, for the month of May, Ashley and I will set up those site visits and chat with you a little bit more about what you're hoping to achieve with a design concept coming your way by the end of the month. And then June 6th is our plant pickup day for those 10 eligible or successful candidates for the program. You can come to the office and pick up your plants. It'll be somewhere around 100 plants per participant. And then you'll take those home and get them in the ground kind of as quickly as possible, or keep them in a shady place and watered until you're able to do so. So the application form is fairly straightforward. We really just want to know if you've experienced blue-green algae before at your property, and if you are able to share some photos, that would be really helpful, and not necessarily of cyanobacteria, but of your shoreline itself, how it currently looks. So yeah, we just ask that you download the application, give us some basic information about address, and what's going on along your shoreline, and then submit it to us as soon as you're able. So for those, I know 10 people is not very many, so for anyone that's not able to secure plants through the Cyanobacteria Shoreline Protection Program this year, we do have opportunities to get your hands on some plants through LRCA this spring. So the tree seedling program is available to anyone in the Lakehead watershed and surrounding who's looking for trees to put on, well, to plant on their property anywhere. They're really affordable price, and all of the proceeds, all of the sales go directly back into our environmental education program. So we're really grateful to have Hills Greenhouse donating these sort of excess tree seedlings to us for this tree seedling program. We'll have sales opening on April 4th. That's the Friday before the Home and Garden Show. You can place your orders online again at lakeheadseed.com. And then we have a set day for tree seedling pickup, and that is Wednesday, May 7th. I believe it's the hours for pickup are from like 11 to 7 p.m. You basically have all day to come in.
Excellent. So in addition to the tree seedling program, the LRCA will be having a native plant sale on June the 4th. Again, all day between 11 and 6 p.m. It'll be here at the LRCA office. And all of these plants have been grown from seed that were collected by Jesse and I in the fall time through our Seeds for Conservation program. And they're all native to Northwestern Ontario or near native, that we have a few from Southern Ontario as well. And they would be an excellent addition to your shoreline stabilization projects, or just your personal gardens for flowers and wherever you'd like along your property. So a little bit more on our Seeds for Conservation program. So all the seeds that we harvest are locally adapted, sustainably and ethically sourced by LRCA staff from our LRCA conservation areas. We have 10 areas throughout the Lakehead watershed. And we started this program to address the lack of availability of true native species for our own stewardship projects. And we kind of have a circular economy happening with this program. So we harvest the seeds from our areas, we grow the plants here at our office, and then we put them back into the ground for our restoration sites, and also love to share the plants with the public as well. So stay tuned for sales in the spring, and we also have our web store available with plants throughout the growing season.
So we are just thrilled that you all wanted to learn more today about blue-green algae and what you can do to sort of lessen its impact where you live. And we really appreciate you all holding your questions, and we would love to open it up now for questions or comments.